Well, let's look at some of the hot issues of the day and get some rapid fire response from you. You mentioned Benghazi earlier. What do you see in this scandal? What mistakes were made? What can we do to make sure those mistakes are not repeated in the future?
Well, first of all, having a consulate in a location where we're unable to protect them demonstrates complete lack of understanding of security. That's a big problem. But I see the biggest problem as, you know, there were the Navy SEALs that rushed over there to try to help save others, and they did. They saved a lot of lives. They were up on top of the compound with their machine guns. But I am virtually positive that having been in our military system for a while, they knew that help was on the way.
Right.
They said, "Yeah, well, we will fight our hearts out, but we know they got our back.
We don't leave.
They're coming.
We don't leave our men behind, right?"
And I mean, what would they have thought if they knew that our leaders were saying, "Nah, it's too dangerous. Yeah, it's okay. Forget about them." I mean, what message does that send to our military from this point forward? It says, are you willing to take a risk? Well, you know, if I get in there, they may not come for me. I better not do that. That's really going to hurt us. The morale in our military right now is at a very low ebb. I have this from many sources. And I think that's the worst thing about it right there.
And then linked with that, it seems kind of a segue to another look at that concept is what happened with Bo Bergdahl, who, you know, appears to be a deserter, and we end up trading 5 top Taliban commanders for him, something that has, you know, really not been part of our policy in the past.
I was actually in Haley, Idaho, where he's from 2 days ago. So there was a lot of conversation going on about it. But to me, you know, the whole Bergdahl situation is 2 different conversations. Should we try to get our people back? Of course we should try to get our people back. To me, that's a separate issue from should we be releasing, you know, dangerous terrorists.
Right.
Particularly at this point in time when there is an intense war going on. It defies any kind of logic and any kind of common sense.
And let's talk about that war that's raging right now in the Middle East. This group ISIS is just sort of sweeping through Iraq, making noise about Jordan and beyond, and you know, reestablishing a caliphate. That's the goal.
That's what you're trying.
This looks like what was developing in the 8th century, where there was this tremendous expansion, one of the fastest expansions in the history of the world. Maybe the Greek Empire moved faster.
Yeah.
What's going on there, and what can we do about it at this point?
Well, you know, our foreign policy is non-existent or terribly chaotic. You know, it began to really hit me back in 2009 when the Iranian people were in the streets trying to overthrow the government. And we did nothing to help them.
Right.
That could have changed the entire complexion of the Middle East drastically in our favor and in the favor of the people there. But we did nothing. That told me right there that we had no concept what we were doing.
Right.
But the reason that everything catches us by surprise is because we don't have a policy. We just react to what's going on. What we need to do now, since we completely blew the peace that we had established in Iraq and didn't know how to preserve it, okay, that's water under the bridge. Can't do anything about it now. Now we're in this horrendous situation. We have to understand what the danger of the ISIS is. What do they want to do? They've already declared that they want to come to America.
Right.
They I mean, they want to make 9/11 look like a walk in the park.
Mm-hmm.
If they're able to establish a whole new state in which they have control, in which they have the potential to develop nuclear weapons. Obviously, we're not doing anything about Iran, developing their nuclear weapons. Lord help us is all I can say.
Right. We have a much more serious situation in the making than what we originally went into Iraq
Exactly.
to take care of.
Exactly. And we can't just sort of take a bystander approach at this stage of the game. We have to recognize who our enemies are, that their intention is to destroy us and to destroy Israel, and we need to be very proactive about that. We had opportunities within the last several months to destroy this embryo as it was developing.
Mm-hmm.
And we had intelligence to tell us that it was happening. Did we do anything? And we're not going to do anything, probably, that's reasonable with the current administration. And I'm just hoping that things can last long enough that we get people who actually understand, world history, understand world events, understand how to use our tremendous innovation, understand how we need to bring our factions in this country together to use our collective intellect, because we have serious problems going on out there. How we develop our natural resources. We are rich with natural resources in this country. And we should be using the EPA not to suppress the development of those, but to work with academia and industry to find the safest and cleanest, most effective ways to use those while we're still preserving our environment. The two things are not mutually exclusive by any stretch of the imagination. And using those natural resources in the whole geopolitical chess game. We can make Europe dependent on us for energy, not Russia. Put Putin back in his little box and lock the door. I mean, we need to be thinking along those lines globally. We need to know how to infiltrate. We need to have people in every society blending in, feeding us information. We need to know how to use those resources effectively to do things. And we'll do good things. I think we have to be decent people. But we also have to be wise people. And we have to know we're living in an evil place. And we have to protect ourselves.
Looking at what has been happening in the Middle East, this movement that seems to have spontaneously birthed itself and has taken on a life of its own just in a matter of weeks. And at the same time that that's going on there, and that you have some of those leaders saying, see you in New York, I look at what's going on in America with the situation on the border, where the Border Patrol is told to stand down, where we're sending engraved invitations to people in Mexico and Central America to come here, and they are. Yes, they're coming in record numbers, and
can you blame them?
No, but who else is able to get through that border now?
Terrorists.
Exactly.
Of course. And, this is a problem. It's a huge problem. And we've allowed it to become a political football rather than solving it. Could we seal the border? Of course we can. We have all kind of technology which would allow us to do that, including drones. But we don't really want to seal the border.
We seal other nations' borders.
Exactly. But what should we really do about the problem? First of all, we have to understand certain things. The agricultural business and a lot of the other things, there's no question that we need people who are willing to do that work. But they need to be legal. And what I have proposed is that we provide a mechanism for people to become guest workers, legal guest workers like they have in Canada. But they have to apply for guest worker status from outside the country. Okay, they have to leave. They can, if they have an employer here who can guarantee them a job, they can come back as a registered worker. They have to pay taxes. They don't get voting privileges. They don't get to go to the front of the line when it comes to becoming an American citizen. It's strictly a working relationship. And the jobs that they are offered have to be jobs that Americans will not take.
Right.
And if you do that, and you have to remove all the inducements, that's how you change the situation. As long as you've got all this candy, you can come over here, you can send your kids to school, you can get health care, you can get welfare benefits, the list goes on and on. If I were down there, I'd come too.
Yeah.
So you have to remove those inducements. What will happen is that people will find their way back out of the country if those inducements are not there. You also have to have real penalties for employers who employ people who are not supposed to be here. I think after the second infraction should be considered a criminal offense, and it should be treated as such. And if we did that, this problem would be resolved very quickly.
Dr. Carson, we're starting to hear rumblings of, folks who are going to be running for president in 2016. Your name's been mentioned quite frequently in that. But, you're kind of, in your book, you're kind of ambivalent about that so far in terms of...
Well, it's not, it wasn't on my bucket list when I decided to retire. I had a very long and arduous medical career, and I was kind of looking forward to learning how to play the organ. I even bought an organ. I always loved, particularly Bach organ music. And I was going to really improve my golf game and learn some new languages, bought all these Rosetta Stones and stuff. But obviously my life has gone in a bit of a different direction. And I don't know what my role will be going forward. I don't particularly want to go into the public arena, recognizing how stressful it is. But at the same time, even less do I want our country to continue to deteriorate. So, if there is a role for me that will keep our country from deteriorating, and the people of the nation really have a strong desire, I would subjugate my own desires. A lot of that comes from wisdom. And, I'll be very interested in what happens in November in our country. Because the people will have an opportunity at that time to make a very public statement about, do they want to continue down the road of big government, nanny state, or do they want to return to a country that is for of and by the people, a country where personal responsibility is important, where the Constitution is put on the top shelf, and we don't try to dismantle it, to a place where we treat everybody equally, to a country where we know that the way to expand business and to reactivate the most powerful economic engine in the history of the world is to take the heavy foot of government off the neck of business and industry, and to reform a tax code and make it something that incentivizes rather than disincentivizes people. A country where we provide people with a ladder to move up rather than pat them on the head and keep them in a dependent position, and a whole host of other things. All of that will be indicated this November. And if the indication is the latter, that would certainly make me think more seriously about getting into the public sector in one way or another.
Do you have a list of things, a checklist that you're going to go down and say, these are the things I'm going to evaluate to make that decision in 2016? Or is it more ethereal than that?
Yeah, it's much more ethereal than that. It's sort of the direction that the people indicate how they want to go in 2016. And, it's also do people continue to clamor and ask me to do it? It's not something that I would ever consider unless I really felt there were a lot of people who want me to do it.
What about who the competition is? Is that a factor?
No, that's not a factor at all.
So there aren't people maybe in public life now that you look to and say, that guy, if he does it, then they don't need me.
Well, let me put it this way. I wouldn't pick a specific person, but I would say if someone came along who really kind of understood all the things that I just rambled off, and people were excited about them, hey,
you'd get back to the orchard.
Give me my golf club.
I always get the sense that you're really looking for that to happen. That you'd be very happy if that happened.
Would be fine with me.
And I think that's one of the things that gives you great appeal to the American public too, is the fact that you're not a politician.
And hopefully would never become one. Well, I would... I've always said I don't really fit the mold because I do not believe in political correctness. I will never submit to the PC police under any circumstances. And I also will never get into bed with a bunch of special interest groups. And I'll be working extremely hard to eliminate the influence of special interest groups, except for one. There's only one special interest group, and that's the American people.
One of the things I've been hearing from people, obviously, you're probably not going to get the Democratic nomination for president, right? I think we can safely rule that out. But one of the things I've been hearing from Republicans is, and these are smart people. Sure. They look at the past few elections and the changing demographics in this country, and they say Republicans can't win the presidency anymore. Could Ben Carson make a difference there?
Probably, but I'm not sure that I agree with the premise that Republicans can't win. Because what you have to understand is that in 2012, more people did not vote than voted for either candidate.
Right.
And as I'm traveling around the country, 4 or 5 states every week, seeing just humongous, enthusiastic crowds everywhere. Red states, blue states, north, south, east, west, doesn't matter. A lot of them are elderly people who said they had tuned out and had said, I'm just waiting to die. Those people are starting to get interested again and coming back in. If we can reactivate those people, and one of the things that I emphasize in the book, One Nation, I should say we emphasize because my wife wrote it with me. My first 4 books, by the way, were written with professional co-writers. The last 2 books, America the Beautiful and One Nation, written with my wife, both became New York Times #1 bestsellers, despite the liberal media's attempt to hide and push them down.
Right.
So, I emphasize in that book the importance of people using their sphere of influence. That's how you get around the liberal media. You need to talk to your uncle who hasn't voted in 20 years about what's going on. And if he's an invalid, you need to get him an absentee ballot. And if he's blind, you need to help him fill it out. And you need to start talking to people in your sphere of influence, your neighbors, even if they're liberals. Talk to them, because what happens is a lot of people who are liberals really haven't thought their positions through, and they listen to their leaders who try to demonize people. They listen to those people who believe in the Saul Alinsky philosophy. One of his rules: never have a conversation with your adversary, because that humanizes them, and your job is to demonize them. They don't want you to talk. They don't want you to. That's why at your universities now you say, we don't want to hear this person. Right. We don't want anybody to hear them. If they have a business, we want to tear it down. If they have a reputation, we want to get rid of it. This is pre-fascist thinking. This is going on. A lot of the liberals don't realize that. They don't know that they're being used. You know, as Lenin said, you know, useful idiots. We can use these people to actually change America, and they won't even know that they are our puppets and that we're using them. But when you begin to have conversations, talk about the kind of America you want to have. What do you want to pass on to your children? A lot of people will begin to realize that, you know, you're not my enemy. My enemy is this person who's trying to fundamentally change America, who's going to ruin it for my children and my grandchildren. Get out there and talk to people. That will make the biggest difference of anything. The mainstream media is never going to give you the right answers because they're part of the problem. There's a book called The Naked Communist. It was written in 1958. Cleon Skousen lays out the whole agenda, including the importance of getting people in important positions in the mainstream media so that they could help drive the agenda. Well, that's what's going on now. And we need to just move around them.
You've been very generous with your time, but I want to ask you one more question about the situation we're faced with right now. We have a situation with a president. I think you would agree with me that he's a lawless president. He's not playing by the rules, the Constitution, and so forth. Should we be? More and more people have been talking about impeachment. Of course, it's not likely to happen with the Senate situation we're in now. But do the House Republicans have an obligation to call this president on some of these issues where he's overstepped his authority?
Of course you do. And I would say that no matter who the president was, and it doesn't matter which party they're from, we are a nation of laws and rules. One of the things that de Tocqueville found so fascinating when he came over to study America, why were the Europeans interested in studying America? Because here was a nation barely 50 years old that was already competing with them on virtually every level. And, you know, he looked at our structure of our government, was very impressed with our separation of powers and how effectively that worked. Well, it doesn't work unless each of the powers, each of the branches understands what their role is. They shouldn't be trying to find every little loophole to get around cooperating with the others. They should be saying, how can we use our collective strength to make sure we are doing the things that benefit the people of America? So yes, they should be looking at that.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Dr. Ben Carson's book is called One Nation: What We Can All Do to Save America's Future. Thanks for being with us on WND TV.
And thanks for all you do.